Hello, church family. It's 2 Minute Tuesday. We've spent this fall studying faith practices, the behaviors that form us as believers. This week, our focus is justice and mercy. Now, the mistake we make when we talk about justice and mercy is we think of them primarily as things that we do, and that's not the way God talks about them in the Bible. The Bible describes justice and mercy not as actions we perform, but actually as conditions that God establishes and then draws us into. God calls us to enter His justice and mercy and then become ambassadors of justice and mercy in a broken world. The Hebrew word that we translate mercy has the same root as the word for womb. Mercy, in other words, is a safe space in which needs are met and hurting people are made whole. The Hebrew word for justice means life made right. That is, the restoration of the original goodness and order and beauty of the entire creation. Throughout the Old Testament prophets, God reminds His people that they live within the safety and abundance of His mercy. And God requires that His people join His unfolding work of justice. In Isaiah 58, the Lord says, "If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and the malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings." So what does a practitioner of mercy and justice look like? I can't think of a better example than Fred Rogers. Back in the 1960s, Mr. Rogers hated a new medium called television. He saw it as a space in which kids were exposed to the very worst human behavior. But instead of rejecting TV, Mr. Rogers set out to reclaim it. He created a program in which children were regularly reminded that every one of them is seen and known, is valued and treasured. He created space for children to process their deepest emotions and their most difficult experiences. Mr. Rogers, in other words, created mercy, this safe space for the most vulnerable to be protected and nurtured. And Mr. Rogers contributed to justice, to life made right. He took something broken and he redeemed it. Jonathan Merritt, in a 2016 article, called Mr. Rogers a restorer. In his words, someone who views the world as it ought to be. In Isaiah 58, God tells His people that they could become repairers and restorers. And that's what God calls us to be. It's a simple invitation. God says, I am making life right, and you can too. So, why settle for being a consumer and a critic and a complainer when you could be called a repairer and a restorer?